as I was looking into what it means to really let everything go, like really everything go, I realized there was that part of me that doesn't want to let everything, the part of me that doesn't want to let everything go, protesting, and ego. So ultimately, I realized that was just another thing to let go.
The ego is not just another thing; it's the only thing. Because if we let go of that, everything else is going to be very cool. So remember, in this teaching, the ego is as I remind everybody, it's the personal psychological self, which is based upon it's been created by our own personal history and life experience. So it's the personal psychological self, which is relatively, there's relative dimensions of it that are unique to each different individual. So I've had particular life experiences that have created my ego in a particular unique way, and you have had life experiences that I haven't had that have, in circumstances that have created your personal ego in a unique way. So there's that's the psychological self, and there's of course all the cultural values and perspectives that are important because, especially for us, because for most of us, our secular postmodern values don't recognize the value or the significance of that which we here together are saying, of that which has the greatest value. So if we live in a shared intersubjective value sphere that doesn't recognize the significance of that which we all agree has the greatest value, there's going to be an enormous conflict and great dissonance between the shared intersubjective value sphere and that which we have decided has greater value than anything else. That's a big problem. That's an enormous problem. It's a real problem. It's a very big problem that has everything to do with real life, the real life that we're all actually living, real life. So that's a very big problem in relationship to real life. So it's just not another thing, it's everything. And there's an enormous challenge that needs to be taken on really quite wholeheartly if we're going to actually be able to get the other side of the psychological self and the culturally conditioned self. It has to be a very big embrace of it, because it's an enormous issue. Now, for example, if this was kind of a spiritual retreat or spiritual gathering within a shared cultural context, maybe some kind of traditional value sphere where everything that we were speaking about was recognized and was part of our shared culture, it would be very different. It wouldn't be considered to be so esoteric, so, way out in left field, so other than the status quo, so absolutely other than the status quo. And that's part of the reason why so much of what I'm teaching seems to be such a challenge to so many of the values from which we live our lives, and so that for many people there's a great dissonance and a conflict, and that's the reason why. But that dissonance is real, and it's very important to kind of like dig into it, come to terms with it, and because we're interested in a long-term result here that's sustaining. But there is. I mean, as long as the shared cultural world space that we occupy doesn't admit and give value to that which do we as individuals have given the greatest value to, we're going to have a problem. There's going to be a very big dissonance between the glory of what you saw within the light of your own awareness, all that glory, and what you're doing every day. And as long as there's a big dissonance or duality between that glory and what one's doing every day, something's fundamentally wrong from a spiritual point of view. Like living in darkness. To whatever degree one has tasted the absolute truth and self-liberation, inherent liberation of that glory, as, for example, you were describing, then it gets even harder to bear the split, because one can't bear living in darkness anymore. But of course, if you don't know what's on the other side, this is just reality. But if you know, then you find it. Then one finds it quite unbearable.
I can see that's where like a real where noble effort comes in too, because to when you
not to recoil from the challenge.
No, right.
Not to recoil from the enormity of the challenge. It's an enormous challenge, and not to recoil from it, not to cave in fear. So it's too big, I can't handle it. Not to recoil in fear. Say, no, it's cool, I can handle it. It's cool. It's big, I realize it's enormous, but I can deal with it. Otherwise, we're going to be crushed by the recoil of the self within our own self that identifies with the fears, desires, values, and perspective of the status quo. We're going to cave in under all that. Why what I teach has always been dangerous, quote unquote, is because of this. Because I've always been very explicit about the non-duality of between spirit and culture, or spirit and life. I've never accepted that there be any kind of split, which I think is what makes my teaching powerful, that much more powerful as a result of it.